they have played him along, and I think the president probably is getting annoyed with this. And so whatever the motivation, if he does, in fact, shift his support back to Ukraine, as the United States has done for years, I'll be glad, but I'm not going to believe it until I see him actually increasing real pressure, sanctions, and also providing patriot, for example, to Ukraine.
The minister joins the leaders of France, Germany and Poland in Kyiv today to discuss a 30-day ceasefire in the war with Russia. But is Putin listening? Ahead of the meeting, the leaders of Europe's 4 major military powers accused Russia of obstructing efforts to make peace. Meanwhile, President Trump has threatened further sanctions on Russia and reiterated his demand for Putin to accept the ceasefire proposal. Let's speak now to General Ben Hodges, former commanding general of the US Army in Europe, speaking to us live from Frankfurt. Morning to you.
Good morning, Chloe.
What do you make of the language from President Trump? Because it does feel there has been a level of consistency since that meeting with Zelensky at the Pope's funeral.
Well, certainly I would like to believe that the president is changing his tone as he realizes that the Russians have tried to make him look foolish. I mean, they have played him along, and I think the president probably is getting annoyed with this. And so whatever the motivation, if he does, in fact, shift his support back to Ukraine, as the United States has done for years, I'll be glad, but I'm not going to believe it until I see him actually increasing real pressure, sanctions, and also providing patriot, for example, to Ukraine.
Well, I was going to ask you what you think it is going to take to get Russia to the table, because it certainly seems at the moment there's not a lot of enthusiasm for that.
Well, Vladimir Putin has zero interest in any sort of real negotiated outcome. His objective has not changed. He still wants the destruction of Ukraine as a sovereign state, and to get it totally under Russian control. But I also believe he has bigger fish in mind, that the destruction of NATO, to break NATO, is on his objective. And so Ukraine is only a step in that direction. I think the fact that UK and Germany and France and Poland together, and with a new, strong German government, I think is going to be powerful. Putin will keep doing this as long as he thinks he has a chance of winning. And so far, he hasn't felt the economic pressure that he needs to feel to realize that he cannot just keep doing this. So what UK is doing, the sanction on the Shadow Fleet vessels, is an important step, but there still is a lot more that could be done economically.
Do you think that this meeting today in Ukraine is anything more than a gesture? I'm just wondering what European leaders can really do at this stage other than show visible support for Ukraine.
I think this is much more than performative. You're talking about 4 of the largest, most powerful, economically powerful countries in Europe, in the world. And so if they got serious and put their efforts together, it could really inflict some economic damage on Russia. And this is what it's going to take. I mean, there have been too many loopholes. There's been too much hemming and hawing about whether or not to seize these illegal vessels carrying oil and gas from Russia to China and India. There is real leverage here if our leaders are willing to use it. I mean, if you add together the combined economies of Europe, and when I say Europe, of course, I include UK, it dwarfs Russia. The combined militaries dwarfs Russia. So the only thing that's been missing is the political will and the self-confidence of European countries to do what needs to be done.
Why do you think that has been missing?
I think part of it is there's an American failure here, that we have turned our back, or this administration has kind of waffled about, what it wants, and seemingly has taken the Kremlin line and side over the last almost 4 months now. So probably there's some uncertainty from our allies. But also, I think it's easier for me to say, harder to do, for multiple European nations to come together and recognize that Russia is a threat. Because if you acknowledge something's a threat, you have to do something about it. And I think people are finally realizing that Russia really is a threat, that it's not going to invade and try to sweep across Europe as they had intended to do during the Cold War. But I do expect that Russia in the next 2-3 years will attack a NATO country and see, does the alliance actually respond? And if we don't, then I think the credibility of NATO will have been severely damaged, and that's a Russian objective.
What are the implications for NATO with Trump in the White House? Do you think he is still invested?
Well, the fact that you even asked that question is a concern. That tells you that a lot of allies are wondering, can they still count on the United States as a member of the alliance? I believe yes, but the fact that there is a question is damaging to the cohesion of NATO, and that leads to the possibility of a terrible miscalculation by Russia as they try to judge, is the United States, would the U.S. actually do anything? Would other countries in the alliance actually respond if Russia invaded, let's say, Latvia, to create this sort of a situation? There will be multiple countries that will, but the fact that people are just not sure about President Trump in the United States, I think, is very dangerous. The summit in The Hague next month will be an important opportunity from President Trump to eliminate all doubt about American commitment to the alliance. I hope he'll do that.
Well, I wanted to ask you, you said at the beginning of this interview that the Russians had been playing the Americans along. Do you think the way to stop that is for Trump to start being tough with Putin, to be a bit threatening? I mean, I'm not suggesting quite how he was with Zelensky in the Oval Office, but he hasn't used firm language towards Putin yet. Is that what's needed?
Yeah, right now, I'm pretty sure the Russians are not too worried about what the Trump administration is going to do. I mean, our approach from the beginning, I think, was doomed to failure because it was based on a faulty understanding of the cause of the war, the geography, why this matters, why Crimea is important, the fact that they couldn't even say that, Russia was the aggressor. This was all music for the Kremlin. And then, of course, all the pressure was put on Ukraine versus on Russia. When Secretary Rubio started early by saying, well, look, Ukraine's going to have to give up something. Why? Why is that a start point? Fortunately, the Ukrainians don't listen to that. As General Cavoli, the Supreme Allied Commander, testified just 3 weeks ago, Ukraine is actually winning on the battleground. Russia cannot knock Ukraine out of the war. And so the way the administration has approached it was based on faulty analysis and assumptions. And then, frankly, the way they've organized. You have Mr. Witkoff, who has not proven to be competent as a negotiator. He goes to Moscow. Secretary Rubio was the Secretary of State, and then General Kellogg is over in Kyiv. We don't have a joined-up diplomatic effort, and we're not using the economic leverage that we have. We could crush Russia's oil and gas infrastructure, could work with our allies to block Russian shadow fleet vessels from taking this oil and gas to India and China. And then, of course, he could always tell President Zelensky, we're going to give you everything you need without restriction. These are the kind of things the president could be using, but so far has been unwilling to do it. And I don't know why, unless he really doesn't care so much about Ukraine. He just wants this to be taken care of so we can get on to other things.
Really good to speak to you this morning. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for the privilege.
Take care. That is General Ben Hodges, former commanding general of the US Army in Europe. I mean, that was absolutely fascinating. Slightly terrifying as well. He thinks there's going to be an attack on a NATO country in the next few years just for Russia to essentially test the NATO alliance and see what's happening. But really saying, actually, Europe is very powerful. This does not have to be performative. He doesn't believe it is performative, this meeting today in Ukraine. But actually, if Europe pull together and start really turning the screws, his terms, on Putin, and indeed Trump potentially follow suit, there could be a change.
The implications of meetings, conversations are huge at the moment, and the diplomacy that is happening in so many different contexts around the world is part of a huge jigsaw puzzle, as you were saying, of kind of uncertainty as to what happens in the short, medium, and long term in so many of these situations.